Welcome back. We're back to the background with Wisp and Jim here. Had a few people ask me some questions on my talk about outruns and trialing and stuff, so I'm going to give you my views on the so-called outwork and how that's done in a trial. Now, the ISDS, International Sheepdog Society, rules for trialing are obviously long-standing. Go back to 1906, as far as I know, and they've proven to work fairly well. So my views are based on what I'm trying to accomplish. There's no question that the ISDS trialing system works. So while I may be critical of the way it's implemented and my views of some of the scoring and stuff, I'm not saying that the ISDS system is bad by any means. But with that in mind, this is what I would say. The point system that is awarded for the outrun, lift, and fetch, the outworks, 20 points for the outrun, 2 points for the lift, 20 points for the fetch. That's too many points in my estimation. Puts too much emphasis on the outwork. Now, I understand that that's exactly what they want. The outwork is considered to be the most important part in many ways. Based on what I've said, on my experience and what I've done, that's the easiest thing to get a dog to do, is the outrun, lift, and fetch. If you're talking about a border collie. Now, if you were talking about an Australian Shepherd or an Australian Cattle Dog or a Kelpie or any other breed of dog that I'm aware of, then yeah, that's going to be hard to get them to do. We are the beneficiaries of the ISDS in this respect, in that this has been bred into the dog, and it's usually not that difficult to get the outwork done. Now, it is true. It looks very nice to have the dog run out, get big and wide out around behind the sheep, picks them up nicely, and just brings them down on the straight line. That looks nice. I understand, and for the trialing aspect, but in a regular working aspect, it's not that big of a deal. Yes, you've got to get the sheep, but that's what border collies do. They naturally gather sheep. How they do it is much more important to me than the fact that it's very aesthetically pleasing to watch a dog run out, pick up 5 sheep, and bring them straight as a die to you to the post. I like to look at that too. I like to watch a nice, stylish dog in action that gets out and does its job well. But again, from a practical working perspective, that may not be what I need. I need first of all, you're not just going to have 4 or 5 sheep sitting out there real close together that you just go pick up and that you can bring nice. Usually they're going to be around somewhere. You're going to have more than that. And you're not going to just walk out to a particular spot like the post, stand there, and send your dog. Now, you can do that. That is true. But it's not practical. I walk out into the pasture to gather the sheep, and I don't go to a particular spot. I go get the dog, and if I can see the sheep, I go to, maybe some spot. But I'm just kind of walking along until I find the sheep and see where they're at. I try to see if the dog knows where the sheep are at, and then I send it to go get the sheep, come by or away. And the dog is usually not right at my feet when that happens. The dog is off out because they know we're going out to work. The dog is out looking for the sheep already. And so you can't use that in a trial, I understand, because everything has to be made consistent so that you can fairly judge dog against dog. And it is true that trialing gives us an objective way to determine dog skills. So that's, in that sense, yes, it's a very good tool to use. But, from a practical working perspective, as I said, when the sheep are out and, you've got them and you're wanting to gather them to pin them up at night or whatever the case may be, the trialing setup, the way it's done for a trial, doesn't accurately replicate that. That's not a knock on the trial. That's just an inherent difference between real world work and the way a trial has to be set up so that you can get a consistent and even playing field for all the different competitors. I'm not worried about a consistent, even playing field when I'm just out there doing practical work. I don't need that. I need the dog to do the work. So that said, the 20 points on the outrun, the 10 points, and then the 20 points on the fetch, and then for the whole drive, you're only getting 30 points. And even then, the last leg of the drive is usually, that's just kind of forgotten. They don't, I mean, uh, and the outrun, lift, and fetch is judged much more harshly by the judges than is the drive. A dog can be meandering, and the sheep are going all over the place on the drive, and they're not losing hardly any points. Whereas a dog that cuts in just a tiny bit on its outrun, they'll knock him 3 or 4 points for that. When it has no effect whatsoever on how the dog gathered the sheep. Now, I've heard it said that it's a good idea, and I would agree with this, that you don't judge the outrun until the dog lifts the sheep, because the proper place for the dog to go is not necessarily 12 o'clock opposite of the hen. If the dog stops short, let's say at like 1 o'clock, or goes beyond to 11 o'clock, 10 o'clock, whatever, you got to wait and see how those sheep lift to know if the dog was correct in where it went to on its outrun, and that's something that I would agree with. But the reality is, most judges are going to want to see that deep, wide stop, come in, and there you go. They'll give full points on an outrun that's like that. And even if the sheep, let's say, because the pressure point was actually further over this way, and the dog is at 12 o'clock and comes in, and then the sheep come to the inside, would be to the handler's right hand side, because the dog is too far over. It overran. It may be at 12 o'clock, but the correct balance and pressure point was more likely at 1 o'clock. And so, that's just the way that the trialing stuff goes. And then the fact that the fetch is a full 20 points again, the easiest thing in the world for a border collie to do is fetch sheep. If your dog can't fetch sheep, so you don't need to have all these points given away for fetching sheep. And the net effect of having all these points, 50 points on the outrun, lift, and fetch, is to reward weak dogs. Because the strong dog that can drive well doesn't get as many points for showing that it can drive well. There's only 30 points available in the first place. And it's not judged as harshly, so that a weak dog that's just kind of, flanking its way around, it's not really taking control of the sheep and putting them where they want. But you got the flanky, and they just kind of, stop, and they'll end up getting all close to full points on the drive. So that weakness is being rewarded. Now, I know this is true because there's no doubt in my mind, and you hear this from other border collie people all the time, the breed is getting weaker. It's a lot weaker now than it was when I started with dogs 25 years ago. It's much harder for me to find and breed a strong dog now than it was then, because they have been bred for the outrun, lift, and fetch, because that's the part that gets the most points. And again, I'm not knocking the trialing system per se, but that part of it has resulted in the weakening of the breed. And I want a stronger dog. I want a dog that, when the dog runs out, let's say it slices in on the outrun and it bumps the sheep, and then on the lift, they don't lift perfectly straight. They go to one side or the other. And then while fetching, let's say, you're not in a trial setting, you're out in the pasture, there's, natural places where the sheep kind of move and meander around. So the dog's not holding a straight line, but the dog is bringing them to you. You don't want the dog to chase the sheep, but he's bringing them to you at a nice pace. And, they're meandering around the natural contours of the pasture. I'd much rather have that than the 12 o'clock outrun, lift them straight and bring them on a straight line to me. That's putting more pressure on the sheep than they need. And usually, in a trial situation, it's not that they're getting a lot of pressure there. It's because the trial field is set up in such a way as to make that possible, which I understand. But again, that's not the way the practical work actually goes. So there are too many points available for that one, lift and fetch, in my estimation. It's judged. There's too much emphasis put on it in the judging, and not enough emphasis in the parts of the trial that would reward stronger dogs, which would be the driving part, the shedding. Pinning doesn't necessarily take a lot of strength, but that takes a combination of power and balance. That's good. I'd rather see more points awarded on the pin than on the fetch. Certainly more points on the drive, and shedding and singling. I mean, you got 10 for each one. I mean that's fine with me too. Um, but the parts of the trial that show the dog's strength are those that are judged the most haphazardly, and they're also those that award the fewest points, and that's why we have weaker dogs now than we used to have. Um, People are breeding them to perform well in trials, not necessarily for work, practical work, and that's what we get. So this is not necessarily bad, but it is bad from the perspective of those who want a good, strong dog. Now, what I have tried to do, I haven't been successful in doing it. One of the females I bought for breeding purposes, I got specifically from Cattle Dog Lines. I mentioned her. Her name's Meg, and her sire's a dog named Mo, owned by Lyle East in Missouri, who's a well-known cattle dog. He also works sheep. But I got her because I wanted a good, strong female, and she is a good, strong female. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to get her to breed. She's come in the heat 3 times since I've had her, and I've tried to breed her all 3 times, and it hasn't. She will not allow a stud dog to breed her. I mean, she'll stand when she's in heat, but as soon as the dog gets ready to actually start breeding her which would result in a tie, she moves and goes out. I'm not sure. I've had a vet look at her twice, and as far as he can tell, there's no reason he can see for it. So it's just one of those quirks. I got a breeding stand for her, and she literally rocked back and forth and knocked herself sideways with the stand. I was afraid she's going to hurt herself, so I took her out of that. But I wanted, good, strong cattle dog lines in my border collies, and she's still a very good outrunner. She's very good at finding sheep. She's my best dog at finding sheep. In terms of just pure push and power, she's got more than the others. Hank is better able to naturally control the sheep in various situations because he will lay off the sheep more than she will, so he's got more natural balance in that sense. Whereas if the sheep are kind of settling and stopping, her instinct coming from the cattle dog line is to get up on them, push them, keep them going. And so that lends itself to what I would refer to. It's not necessarily a lack of balance on her part. It's just that her natural desire is to keep moving the sheep rather than let them come to a resting balance, which is good. That's what I want. But see, that kind of dog would not be rewarded in a trial setting. That would result in a lot of lost points. Because, for example, when I went to the pen and got to the mouth of the pen and I'm trying to pin the sheep, she's not going to want to sit back and just kind of flank until we work the sheep in. She's going to want to come up, literally hit them, and get them into the pen. They'll scatter a couple of times, then she'll get them in the pen. But I would have lost all the points by then. But that's not a fault in the dog. That's how she works, and it's a good quality that she has because she is maintaining control over those sheep. And since they would be sheep that she would not have ever worked before, the sheep are going to be nervous and they're going to be more likely to scatter. And so she would be penalized for that. I understand that that's exactly what the trial is supposed to do. It's supposed to reward a dog that can settle any kind of sheep. That's a good thing, I understand. But from a practical working perspective, that's not what I need. I need the dog with the power to pin the sheep quickly. I don't want to sit there and flank back and forth for 5 minutes and slowly ease them into the pen so I can get full points. I want them in the pen. And if she comes up, hits them 2 or 3 times, and then boom, they're in the pen 5 seconds later, then that's good. That's exactly what I wanted to do, and I'm glad she does it. But that's just an example of the things I'm talking about here, about how, the way that the trial points are set up and the way that the judging is carried out does not reward stronger dogs. So that's, in essence, that's my beef. It's not a beef, and I still fall. These are famous trialing dogs. I pay attention to trialing because as I understand that gives you an objective measure by which to determine which dogs are better. So yeah, I understand, and it's a very useful tool in that regard. I'm not saying that it shouldn't be done. I'm saying that the way that it's done doesn't maximize good, powerful working dogs, which is what I would like to see. But that's me. That's not everybody else. But that's that's what I'm talking about when I have mentioned many times. I'm not really interested in trialing, and I'm not getting worked up over the outruns and this and that. That's why, from what I've just explained, that my practical experience tells me that the outwork does not need to be rewarded disproportionately with points, because it's the easiest thing in the world for a border collie to do. And if they do it in such a way that doesn't necessarily look really nice, that's not that big of a deal either. I would much rather have a dog that looks really nice on the drive, that gets behind those sheep and just pushes them along, than a dog that does a real nice outrun or a nice soft lift or something like that. If the dog slices the outrun, hits them, pushes them in, and then gains control of them and brings them back, that's fine with me. Those sheep are learning real quick who's the boss. A dog that's going out there tiptoeing around them and those sheep are sitting there thinking, I got a pansy here. And you will see that on the drive. When you start to drive, those sheep will stop, 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 stop. When you see that happening all the time, that's a weak dog in most cases. So that dog, however, that does that is more likely to win the trial because of the point system and the way, like I said, that the outrun, lift, and fetch are judged in comparison to the drive. Every time those sheep stop on the drive, points should be taken, but they're not. They just kind of flank and bump the sheep along, and I mean, it's painful for me to watch when that stuff is happening. I want the dog to get behind those sheep and take them and just keep moving them. That doesn't have to be perfect, so it's the real straight line. They can be following the natural contours and kind of doing this, as long as the dog's in control and the dog's getting them where the dog's being told to put them. I don't care about this either. It's nice for them to go on a straight line, but again, that doesn't do anything for me from a practical perspective. I want them put where I want them put. And if they meander a little on the way because of the contours of the land or whatever the case may be, because the dog may be putting the pressure on them and they're trying to get uneasy a little bit, doesn't bother me in the least. I'd much rather have that than the sheep stopping, the dog stopping, and then the dog's flanking around instead of moving them. That's a problem in my estimation. And trialing does not penalize that enough, in my view, and it rewards weaker types of dogs. So that's what I have on that, and I will see you in the next video.